Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today I have a very unique bike to show you and why this is one of the best sport touring machines you can possibly get for under $5,000. This is a 2004 and it's a very unique bike. It's probably one of the better touring machines that you can get. The Honda st1300 is a perfect blend of a Honda Goldwing and a Honda VFR. But they come in two categories. Really, this one lines up a little bit more with the FJR and the Kawasaki Concourse and the BMW RT. But this one is no longer being made. A little bit of a history behind this particular bike and the STs. The ST started off as a st1300 and it was competing with a much boxier bike at the time. It was the Kawasaki Concourse 1000. So Honda built it as an 1100. It had a shaft drive and it had this really amazing motor, which is a V4, which sits sideways on the frame. And it was extremely smooth. Everybody loved the st1100. And then in 2003, Honda redesigned the ST and made it a 1300, and it looks like this. So all the st1300s look like this. There's no changes to them. There's little modifications in 08, but other than that, this bike is unchanged. The big problem with this bike is that in 2003, the first st1300, and I had one, it had a very dangerous high-speed wobble, and the ST owners, the pan-European owners, call it the ST weave, and my 03 had this. But most people, they thought, oh, you have it loaded improperly. You have stuff on the top case, because there were several police officers, mainly in England, that died because of this weave. And impressions are very important, and because of that, the st1300 was decommissioned. So I try to tell people to avoid the 03, and if you do get a very inexpensive 03, it's really just not a high-speed bike, because at 100 miles an hour it'll start to weave uncontrollably. And this one has been fixed. Whatever Honda did, it's been fixed with this. All the 04s and up, they have been completely changed to avoid that weave. But Honda decided to get rid of this bike entirely because of the serious nature of the first accidents that happened. The cops don't use this anymore. So because of that, you can get amazing deals on this bike. You can get them for $5,000 and less on the marketplace. And the riders that do get this are extremely hardcore when it comes to this bike. They love it. And when you ride this, you do realize that it's a very good handling bike, and you get touring-like comfort. So a lot of riders, they will put like 100,000 miles, 200,000 miles on this thing. It is one of the most comfortable bikes I've ever ridden, and I've ridden Goldwings. The newer Goldwing does have an amazing amount of handling, but this one has an edge when it comes to sport, and you're comparing it to the Goldwing. Honda now just makes the Goldwing, and they have decided that that's their platform for sport touring, like the larger sport touring and touring. But let's look around this bike and I'll show you what makes this st1300 good. Up here you have the headlights. The headlights on this are really amazing, and there's a lot of wind protection. If you notice, like everything is integrated. So the integrated mirrors, then they also have the turn signals, really large headlights, and this shields you from the wind extremely well. So this front end is very wide, but when you're riding it, it just doesn't feel like it's an extremely large bike. Up front, you have dual disc rotors with ABS, and the unique part of this is that you have a 18-inch front tire. Normally you have 17 inches, but I do like the larger front tires. They feel a little bit more stable. The long wheelbase of this bike and this large tire do make a difference. It handles a little bit slower in the corners perhaps, but I think that having a larger tire and something this big just kind of creates a little bit more stability going down the road. This motor, of course, is a liquid-cooled 1300cc. It's a 90-degree V4, and it's chain-driven, and it's got 4 valves per cylinder with fuel injection. It also doesn't make a lot of power. It only makes 117 Newton meters of torque with 117 horsepower, so it's not a lot, and it's also got a 5-speed transmission, not a 6-speed like most modern bikes. The engine on this bike is right here, like that's the head of one side. This part, this plastic bit, you can pull it out without removing any plastic. Now the downside of having an engine like this, and most of the larger sport touring machines, including adventure touring machines that have big engines, they create a lot of heat in the summer. So in the winter, it actually feels pretty good. But having an engine like this is really kind of unique in a bike. On this side, there's actually like a big metal crash protector because you have the engine here, so Honda decided to put this here. This particular bike has got these winglets, and what you can do is you just put your feet there when you're riding to get some highway comfort. But there is a big crash bar here, and this folds really nicely. So there's a lot of accessories that you can get for this particular bike because it's been made for so long, and the riders that get this are aficionados for the ST Pan-European. Going down to the foot pegs, you have really nice Cushy Rubbery Absorption and a really large brake lever. It's extremely comfortable to ride. There is no vibration coming from the foot pegs at all. Have your battery here. You can access it by just removing this. I have a lead here for plugging in various electronics like a battery tender. You have access to the shock. This is a Race Tech shock. Here you have a foot peg for your passenger. I do find it kind of interesting that they didn't somehow integrate this a little bit more with the design of the bike, because everything of this bike is integrated into the plastic. And when you look at even the Honda Silverwing, you have a little bit more design when it comes to the rear foot pegs. When you come here, this is kind of important because this particular bag is very exposed. So this has got an individual crash bar for each side of the bike, so you don't damage this. These bags are very expensive, and these bags are particular to this bike, so it's not like you can get any other type of bike saddle bag. It's a very simple system of removing. It doesn't have electronic locks or anything. It's open sideways, which I don't like. Let me show you. You simply just put the key here, twist it, and you have, if you pull this up, it kind of comes out, and you have plenty of storage. Remove the bag. You have a lock with a key from your ignition just to pull it out, and then you kind of pull up and remove it. As you can tell, the bike, this st1300, looks terrible without the bags. FJR, when you look at the bike without bags, it actually looks like it was designed with the intention of sometimes running without the bags. But this one, it looks terrible. Honda did a terrible job of making it in such a design way that you could just remove it if you felt a little bit sportier and you wanted to just corner. But this bike is meant to ride with just the bags. It looks really bad without them. The FJR's got a little bit more flexibility. So to put the bag back on, there's this clip here, you can see it, and this part just kind of slides on there, and you just put it in and you drop it down, and then you just close this with a key. Now new ones have, or at least BMW, the FJR, a lot of them have electronic stuff, so you don't have to put the keys anywhere. That's a really nice feature, and I wish this one had it. But remember, this is a 2004. It is 18 years old. It's close to historic. Got a pretty interesting silencer. It's like a triangle shape with two tips. And it sounds pretty good. This is the stock exhaust. It's quiet, but at the same time, it's got like this really nice grumble that Hondas are known for. It's a very unique sound. I think when you hear this bike run, it is a typical Honda sound because of the really cool engine. So it sounds great, but I think it's a learned type of taste for this sounding bike. If you like the VFR sound, you're gonna love this sound. First, this bike is also known for its shaft drive. The shaft drive is very much maintenance free. I've never heard of any issues with the shaft drive or motor for that matter. Honda did integrate this part of the luggage. You know, it does look terrible without the luggage, but when you see the luggage on this bike, it looks really unique and very interesting. And turn signals, brake light, integrated into one piece. So that is nice. It's almost scooter-like, almost like automotive styling for these bikes. And that's what they were going for. Even the Honda Silverwing was that sort of style. It just kind of integrated everything together. This left side of the bike, you have a preload adjustment, and I'm not really messing much with the suspension. It is very good. The suspension on this has been redone. It's got new race tech springs and everything, so it's extremely comfortable. So it's set up for me, but it is nice that they gave you this. New ones, of course, the new sport touring machines, a lot of them have electronic suspension. Another thing that's interesting is this. You pull this lever out, and this is how you put the bike on the center stand. This bike is also very easy to put on the center stand because of this little lever, and maybe it's just the way it's balanced. The Super Tenere is probably one of the most difficult to put on the center stand. So to pull it, another thing you have to remind yourself is that I have these crash bars on the saddlebags, and the saddlebags, when you're walking the bike, sometimes you hit your leg, especially if you're a smaller guy. You're constantly hitting stuff, and it is a big bike, 650 pounds. So I'm going to put it on the kickstand, and there we go. And all you have to do is just kind of put it up like this. A lot of times I don't even use this little thing, but you push down on the center stand and it just comes right up. Something that Honda does often is they put two tanks on this bike. So when you are filling up, it goes into here. This is a smaller tank, and then it drips down to a second tank under the seat. What that does is create a little bit lower center of weight, and coupled with the motor kind of sideways, it does help. This has a very different feeling than the FJR. The FJR does feel much heavier because the battery on the FJR is right up on the top as well. The gas tank is really large and high up on top. So it's got a much higher feeling of weight. Seat is not the stock seat, but this is a two-seat type of thing. It is, I think it's a Russell Daylong saddle. It could be something else, I'm not really sure, but the one thing I do like is the amount of comfort this gives me. I prefer the dual seat rather than having the single seat. Right side you have a non-lockable little compartment. On this left side you have a lockable compartment, so if you want to put some valuables in there, use the key, open it up, and it's quite large. It goes down for quite some, not as deep as the Honda Silverwing, but it is very nice. Look at the controls. So on the left side, of course, you have your clutch, very easy clutch to pull. You have your high beams, you have your turn signals, you have your horn, and here you have something that's very unique for me, because I have only had two bikes with electric windscreens. This goes up and down quite a bit, and it is extremely handy, specifically in the winter. On this left side, you have this knob, which is an electronic headlight adjustment up and down. And then you have your buttons, which are a little bit hard to adjust, but on the top you have illumination for the dash. It basically changes the dash lights a little brighter and dimmer. I believe you have only 3 settings. So the FCD is really like the miles per gallon calculator, and then you have the trip trip 1, trip 2, and then reset by pushing the same button. On this right side, of course, you have the usual throttle. This is not an automatic. It's got the kill button here, you have your start, and that's pretty much it. And then the throttle. The front brakes are phenomenal on this, and most of the st1300s have very good brakes, but this one has really amazing brakes, and of course it's ABS. On the dash, let me turn this on so it gets illuminated. You have the fuel injection kick in. On this side you have your tach, and then speedo, and then you have the clock, the average miles per gallon. It averages about 38 to 39 miles to the gallon. It is a very big bike. The range, the gas tank on this is 7.7 gallons, so that means that you'll get around 300 miles per tank on it. So that's pretty good. I hate having to stop. It's an extremely simple and almost antiquated dash, but it's better than the dashes of the similar year FJRs and Concours. This thing was much ahead of its time compared to the competition. On this side you have dummy lights. The cool thing is the st1300 sign is illuminated at night, so that's a nice touch by Honda. Electric windscreen, that's the highest setting. And that's the lowest setting. So you're going to get decent amount of wind in the summer, and that's important on this bike. That's the fuel pump for the lower tank. That's a different tank than this one. 3-step height adjuster for the seat. So right now it's at the lowest, but you can position it really well just by having it this way. So you can put it at the lowest, and in the winter you probably want it at the lowest so you get the maximum coverage. But I think that's a nice feature of some bikes. Position on this, really comfortable. The ergonomics on it are top notch, and the way I fit with my knees in this piece of plastic, you're in a cocoon when you're riding. So as you're riding, the wind is just going all over the place, and it's not hitting you. You do feel the mass of this bike, so going into corners and stuff, I do feel like the mass is there, but it surprisingly handles better than what you'd expect for something so big. But get this, I sold my Honda Silverwing scooter, and this thing only weighs 97 pounds more than the Honda Silverwing scooter. But the weight on the Silverwing is much lower than this, so it feels lighter. And that's what the Silverwing does. That's what the st1300 does compared to the FJR. The FJR, the weight is just so much higher that when you're moving this thing, for example, in a garage, it doesn't feel like it's the FJR's weight. The weight on that thing is just so much higher. The FJR, though, is a better sport bike than this. It's got more power, it's more fun to ride, but there's an elegance to this particular bike that a lot of riders just do not sell them. They get these bikes and they just ride them forever. It's like one of these bikes that people joke that it's a forever bike. This is one of those forever bikes for a lot of riders. And get this, the prices on these are just so low because of the bad reputation it had in 2003. So you can get these for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, and $6,000 if you're looking for the higher range and lower mileage. It's very common to see these bikes with 100,000 miles and up. This one has only got 25,000 miles, so it's really a baby in Honda st1300 years. Adventure type of bikes, they generally have a little bit more of a forward position and the handlebars that are wider. I do like that a lot because you can move it around a lot easier at low speeds, but this one is a lot more stable at high speed sweepers. Even like at 100 something miles an hour, this thing is going to do much better than a Yamaha Super Tenere. But there are some trade-offs. First, the mileage is not that great. Some people don't particularly like how smooth the engine is. I do, but it doesn't have crazy power. When you look at the stats of this bike on paper, It just doesn't look like it's a bike that can handle corners or be fun to ride. But it's deceiving. Another super deceiving thing about this bike is that you're going 70 miles an hour almost always, and you look down and you're in the 30-mile-an-hour zone. I have never gotten in so much trouble than riding my st1300 just because of that effect. This bike is just so incredibly smooth that it's hard to believe. And when you look down at the speedo and you see 100 miles an hour, it doesn't feel like you're going like that because the wind is just going all around you. You're in a cocoon, and you can seriously get in trouble with riding something like this if you don't have self-control. Let's start this bike up. Starts right up, and it sounds pretty decent. It doesn't sound too obnoxiously loud, but you can tell it's quite a powerful motorcycle. Super quiet engine. They do make stay-tuned exhaust for this bike. They're particularly expensive, but I find that the stock exhaust on this is very nice sounding. The brakes on this are excellent as well. This bike is so easy to speed. It's 55 miles an hour. It feels like I'm doing like 10 miles an hour. Oh, but I like how it handles a whole lot more. It's a little bit more predictable. The power is a little bit more linear. I'm trying to keep within reason of the speed limit. You don't need to downshift very much on it. It does have a lot of room for cornering. I've never hit any pegs on this thing. A lot of bikes do that too. I hate doing that. Like, I try to stay within reason. Yeah, this thing will really... Oh man. Oh my god. Yeah, I'm up to speed. But it's very predictable the way it handles, the way the power goes. But you don't want to go too fast into corners on this because it's a massive bike. By the way, the roads are kind of cold, so it's not like you have full cornering capabilities. So smooth, the shifting is just so precise. These big long sweepers, this is what this bike likes. Maryland, near the border's got quite a few of these. They're really cool. I think the big problem with the st1300 and why it wasn't successful has a lot more to do with the st1100. The st1100 was this phenomenal bike that was loved by everybody that owned it. That's a great bike. In a way, the st1100 is a better bike than this because the st1100 slightly smaller in physical dimensions, but didn't have the sporty nature of this bike, and I think a lot of people like that. It's the same reason that a lot of the Goldwing riders, the favorite bike to get is the GL1500 because that was the last big real touring Goldwing before they started making the sportier, less dense, less big Goldwings. It's a great motor, like any of these STs that you get, even the one with a high-speed wobble. It's going to be an incredible, reliable machine. But unfortunately, like Honda from the gate, they came off the extremely reliable, robust st1300, and they started with the 2003, and it had all of these issues. The benefit of having a 5-speed 1300cc bike like this, you're on the highway, you're in 5th gear, you don't have to downshift at all because this bike just has plenty of power. The ST on the highway is probably one of the nicer bikes I've ever had to ride because it's in the middle of the winter. I'm not cold. It feels like so stable, and I can ride this thing for hundreds of miles without having any discomfort. In the summer though, I find this bike to be extremely hot. Welcome to Monarchy Battlefield. First time riding on the gravel on this bike. This is quite a handful, but it's very stable. Yeah, the comfort and the speed and agility of this bike is very unbeatable for sport touring. Beams, high beams, man, fantastic lights here. Very surprised. This is from 2004 and the headlights on this are better than many newer bikes with low beams, high beams. Low beams, high beams. Works really well. Alright guys, that is the st1300. These are phenomenal bikes. The value that you get on one of these bikes is incredible. But they are heavy, fast, comfortable, mile-munching type of bikes. These are not meant to be garage queens. And the riders that you see on these bikes, they tend to be riders that ride quite a bit. So they are quick, nimble, and much better than what their size looks like. You can get one of these bikes and keep up with sport bike riders left and right. It is a super good, capable bike that's torquey, it's got decent enough horsepower, it's sophisticated, and better yet, you can get amazing deals on a shaft-driven V4 1300cc bike like this that's a great commuter and great all-around bike. It's not a good gravel bike, but you already know that's not something that's required of this bike. You can ride it in gravel, but it's not really meant for that. This is the type of bike you get on in one side of a continent and you get on the other side of the continent and you still feel nice and fresh from the ride. Alright guys, I hope you guys enjoyed a little bit on this st1300. It's a great bike. Go out and buy one. And make sure you hit that like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.